It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at the players of Uruguay. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is Series 28 on the players of the 2024 Copa America. This episode covers Uruguay's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We examine the participation of players in games over the recent period, as well as a couple of other factors to categorize them into definite, likely, possible, and so on. We'll also introduce the candidates here and give a little bio information. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. At that time, we'll go back over the list that we create here and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode will have three sections. Section one, we're going to look at some general information on the team. In section two, that's where we cover the main candidates in each position, give some biographical information, and talk about their likelihood of making the squad. And in section three, we summarize and conclude. Let's begin then. Section one, some information on the team. We're going to begin with major retirements over the period. So we have defender Martin Cáceres, 116 caps for him and 4 goals. He played from 2007 to 2022. And of course, all of these players, a lot of tournament involvement, which we won't go over. In the 2022 World Cup, he started game 1 and then was relegated to the bench for games 2 and 3. That pretty much signaled the end of his international career, and has not appeared since the 2022 World Cup. So Martin Cáceres, not retired from club soccer, playing for LA Galaxy in the USA now, but retired from the national team effectively. Next, goalkeeper Fernando Muslera, 133 caps for the national team. He played from 2009 to 2022. He's also still active at the club level, still with Galatasaray in Turkey, where he has been for many years now, since 2011. And again, a starter in most tournaments. But in the World Cup in 2022, that was his first tournament, kind of taking a backseat there behind Sergio Rocher, the starting keeper. Muslera then has not played for the national team since 2022 and is effectively retired. Neither of these players have announced anything, but just based on their call-ups. Thirdly, we have Diego Godin, another huge name for them. 161 caps for the defender and 8 goals. He's a central defender and was captain of the team. He played from 2005 to 2022 and is still active. He's with a small club in Uruguay now. And Diego Godin was captain of the team for the World Cup. He started games 1 and 2, and then he also was relegated to the bench for game 3 and hasn't appeared since the World Cup. Finally, we have Edinson Cavani, 136 caps for the national team and 58 goals. He's a forward and played from 2008 to 2022. So a real generation retiring here. He's currently with Boca Juniors in Argentina, so still playing at the club level there. And he was a substitute in the World Cup in 2022, having been a starter in the 2021 Copa America, just subbed into games 1 and 3 of the World Cup, and that was also his last appearance for the national team. So 4 big retirements there. We're going to see some other, kind of part of that generation who are no longer being called up for the team, and or who are taking kind of a back seat, like we saw of some of these players in the World Cup even. Let's move on to club affiliation for Uruguay players. So we'll just talk about some of the big names and big clubs. So Jose Maria Jimenez is with Atletico Madrid. Rodrigo Bentancur with Tottenham Hotspur. These are again the kind of the veterans with big clubs. Federico Valverde is with Real Madrid. And Darwin Nunez, not as experienced as those players, but with Liverpool in England. Those are probably the biggest ones. They also have some younger players, not well known, but with good clubs like Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona, Sporting Lisbon, and Dinamo Moscow. We won't get into it because we'll be talking about this when we go through the players, and then a lot of players playing for top clubs in especially Brazil and Argentina. Really, not many playing in Uruguay. Penarol, one of the bigger clubs there. We do have one for Liverpool Montevideo there. But at least most of them will go to Argentina and play for the bigger clubs, Boca Juniors and River Plate, if they can. That seems to be a stepping stone, that or Brazil. But I think the goal is over to Europe where they get paid better. But still a few in Mexico and the USA, and then several with kind of smaller teams. Not small teams, but smaller than the ones we've mentioned in Europe. Okay, so that's just a flavor of their club affiliations. Let's move on to recent games for the team. And so we're going to well, in terms of analyzing the players' participation, we're going to take it from after the World Cup there. So we're going to do the 11 games that they played after the World Cup. 9 of them are significant, though. 2 of them were kind of experimental or B-team games, and also they were undergoing a manager change from March to June 2023. So we look at the players' participation over those games, but we're not going to look closely at the lineups because there was a lot of changing during that time. As far as the formations go and players in the position, we're going to start a little further back by looking at the World Cup and kind of taking it from there. We're going to see a lot of changes from the World Cup or after the World Cup compared to the World Cup itself. So those are 5 games in the World Cup, which will be part of our analysis of formations and positions. And then they had 4 games from March to June 2023. Again, 2 of those were kind of experimental. We're not really including them in our analysis that much. But the key games there are the World Cup 2026 games. The World Cup 2026 qualifying games. Those were from September to November in 2023. And then they did play 2 friendlies in March 2024. But we're only really going to consider one of those. In fact, we're not even sure that the information for the other one against Basque was reliable. But anyway, it was more of an experimental squad, so we won't include that. So in terms of tournaments, Uruguay have made it to every recent tournament. Of course, they qualify automatically for Copa Americas, but they've been making it to the World Cup consistently. And so we have those games to look at. As far as that, we won't go too far back in the history when we talk about players, maybe 1 or 2 tournaments and maybe 1 or 2 clubs, but we did give a bit more detail when we covered Uruguay for the 2022 World Cup Players Media Cast. So you may be interested if you want more details, especially on the ones who are now retired or basically off the squad from that media cast. All that is available on YouTube and on our usual podcast networks. minutes. Okay, let's talk about formations a little bit. So basically in the World Cup, in the 3 games they played, it was 3 different formations. They've been much more consistent since then, using just 2 formations. And so here they are. The first one is a 4-3-3. They used that in the World Cup one time. I just want to make sure of that. Yeah, yes, they used that one time in the World Cup. They've used it 6 of the 12 times since the World Cup, or 6 of the 11 games since the World Cup, so about half of the time. The other one they've used about half of the time is the 4-2-3-1. So actually, I'm doing the 9 major games plus the 4 the 11 games plus the 3 World Cup games in this calculation. So altogether, they've used those 2 formations 43% of the time each, or 6 out of the 14 games. So I'm saying about half the time. And then they used 2 other formations, both of them in the World Cup. That was a 3-5-2 and a 4-4-2, which we don't see afterwards. So kind of very mixed in the World Cup there. And just a final note on this is that the World Cup 3-5-2 formation was the only time they used a 3 at the back formation. So we're always going to be looking at 4 at the back, except for that one game. Okay, that is the formations, and we'll talk about that consistently as we go through. The last thing for us to look at here is their upcoming games. So they have 2 friendlies scheduled. The first one is May 31st in Costa Rica. They play, naturally, Costa Rica. Most teams are playing their warm-up games in the USA, so a little unusual that they are playing that one in Costa Rica. The second one is in the USA. It's June 5th against Mexico. So those 2 games, quite a while, 15 days before the tournament begins, and maybe even 16 days before they play their first game. So anyway, those are the warm-up games. And let's go on to part 2, the main part of the mediacast here, where we look at the candidates. We'll begin with the manager. We have Marco Bielsa as the manager, and he has been leading the team since May of 2023. Many may know him from Leeds United in England from 2018 to 22. He's quite a famous manager. He was with Lazio in Italy, Marseille in France, Atletico Bilbao in Spain, and he's also managed some national teams. Chile from 2007 to 11, and Argentina from 1998 to 2004. So he has been through several tournaments, most notably the World Cup in 2002 with Argentina and the World Cup in 2010 with Chile. Okay, let's look at a bit of the longer history of the manager as we summarize the position, as it were. So Oscar Tabarez managed the team, managed Uruguay from 2006 to 2021. And on top of that, that was his second stint managing the team. So 15 years manager Oscar Tabarez, and it could be said that a strong generation retired with him in 2021, although it's not an exact fit. After Tabarez left, Diego Alonso replaced him. From 2021 to 23. Alonso secured World Cup qualification for the 2022 World Cup, as well as leading them through the Cup. That didn't go so well, though. They only managed, they failed to get out of the group stage in that Cup, and Alonso resigned shortly after the Cup. A caretaker manager stood in until Bielsa was announced as their manager in May of 2023. So we'll see the first couple of games that we're looking at were not under Bielsa, and of course the World Cup selections would have been made by Alonso. Okay, that is the manager situation. Let's go on to the goalkeepers, and we're going to begin by listing the candidates here. So we have no definite candidate, but we have 3 likely candidates: Sergio Rocher, Santiago Mele, and Franco Israel. We also have a possible candidate in Randall Rodriguez. And of course, we have the retired Fernando Muslera, keeper for a long time, but a couple of other names as well. Actually, for several of these categories, we have several names that we're not actually going to put on the list, but we will recall them, as it were, if they make the squad in part 2. So we're just going to go with the main names here. Also, kind of, we'll call him retired, is Martin Campana. So he was the backup keeper in many tournaments. And Sebastian Sosa was the backup keeper in the 2022 World Cup, but hasn't appeared since, let me see, since the World Cup. So we won't go into detail on those retired players, but we will go into a bit more detail on the candidates here. So let's begin with Sergio Rocher, the first of our likely candidates. He is 31 years old, and he has been with the team since 2021 with 18 caps. He plays for Internacional in Brazil, and was with Nacional in Turkey, but Nacional in Uruguay, one of the biggest teams there. But he was playing outside of Uruguay before that for teams in Turkey and Netherlands. So he had returned back to Uruguay, now in Brazil. Sergio Rocher was the backup keeper for the 2021 Copa America and the starting keeper in the 2022 World Cup. And he has since started 7 of their 11 games since the World Cup. He was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 2 matches. So that's why we have him as a likely candidate, although really he's pretty much a definite candidate and probably the starter. Next, we have also likely Santiago Mele. He's 26 years old, new to the team since 2023, but he has 4 caps already, and he plays for Plaza Colonia in Uruguay. So one of the few players on the squad playing in Uruguay, and actually he's not, because he's on loan to Junior in Colombia since 2023, but he has played outside the country, actually, in Argentina, Spain, and Turkey. Santiago Mele has not been part of any tournaments. That's why his name is in light gray if you're looking at the YouTube feed here. He got his first appearance in March of 2023, but he did start 3 of their remaining 11 games, as well as subbing in for 1, and he was on the bench for all 7 others. So Santiago Mele looking like the backup keeper here. The third candidate, though, is Franco Israel. He's also at the likely level. He's 24 years old and has 2 caps for the national team since 2023. And he's with Sporting Lisbon in Portugal since 2022. He also played for Juventus's under-23 and youth club there, Juventus in Italy. Franco Israel got his first appearance in June of 2023 and started the first of their remaining 9 games since the start of 2023, and he was on the bench for 7 matches and not selected for just 1. So a likely candidate there in Franco Israel. Our possible candidate is Randall Rodriguez, and I think in this media cast we're just going to we will do the details on the possible candidate. So he's 20 years old, but no caps for the national team. And he got his first appearance in June 2023 and was on the bench for 2 matches, but that did include the last match, giving him a slightly better chance here. But he wasn't selected for 6 matches, all of the World Cup qualifying matches, Randall Rodriguez. So there we go. We don't have any possible or unlikely possible but unlikely, or seemingly off the squad players. Well, we do have a few of those, but we won't get into them. But as we go forward, we're just going to mention names in those categories and then give more detail if they're actually selected for the squad. Let's summarize the position of goalkeeper then. It was Sergio Rocher in all 3 games of the World Cup, and he went on to play most of the games after. But Mele came in for 3, including 1 World Cup qualifier and 2 friendlies. Israel also started a fairly experimental friendly in June of 2023. So that's why I think Rocher is a starter, because he is starting most of the World Cup qualifying matches, the key matches there. Okay, on to central defence, and let's talk a bit about the position before we introduce the candidates. So Uruguay tried a 3-man backline in their second World Cup game. That was the only time they used a 3-man backline, and it didn't go well. It was a game against Portugal, and they lost the game. Otherwise, they have always used a 4-man backline over this period. So we're going to expect 2 central defenders in all but one of the games. Okay, let's look at the candidates. We have a definite candidate in Sebastian Cáceres, not to be confused with the veteran Martin Cáceres, who we introduced in part 1 and who's now off the team. Sebastian Cáceres, the only definite candidate here. We have a likely candidate in Ronald Araujo, and a possible candidate in Jose Maria Jimenez, and actually he's the captain of the team, so maybe slightly more than possible, but based mostly on his participation just at the possible level here. Also at the possible level, Bruno Mendes. And then we have 2 possible but unlikely candidates. We'll just mention them by name here. Santiago Bueno and Nicolas Marachal. And then 2 players who seem to be off the squad, Sebastian Coates. And I don't know why I said 2 players. In fact, we have 6 players who seem to be off the squad, but we're not even going to put them on the list because we don't want to gum up the works with them. The only other one I'll mention is the retired Diego Godin, so a big loss for them. He was the captain of the team for quite a while, but no longer an option for them. Okay, let's look at the main candidates there. So we have Sebastian Cáceres, he's 24 years old with 10 caps since 2022, so making fast inroads into the team here. He plays for Copa America in Mexico since 2020. He was in Uruguay before that. And Sebastian Cáceres has no experience at tournament level. He was selected for the large preliminary squad for the 2022 World Cup, but didn't make the final cut. However, he has become important to the team here, starting 8 of their 11 games since the 2022 World Cup, and he was on the bench for 2 others. So Sebastian Cáceres, a definite candidate here. The likely candidate is Ronald Araujo, and he is 25 years old with 16 caps and 1 goal since 2020. He is with Barcelona in Spain since 2020. He went directly from Uruguay, Boston River in Uruguay, to Barcelona, joining their B team first and then their senior team. Araujo has 2 tournaments under his belt, the Copa America 2021 and the World Cup 2022, selected for both, but didn't see any field time in either of those games. In fact, in both of the tournaments, he wasn't even on the bench for some of the games due to a muscle injury in the first case. And yeah, it seems like an injury in the second case as well. So I was a bit curious why they selected him as an injured player. Anyway, Ronald Araujo returned after a 13-month absence where he was out with 4 separate injuries. He returned in October 2023 and then started 4 of the remaining 5 games. However, he was not selected for the last match. So Ronald Araujo, with all that, we consider him a likely candidate. It looks like he would have been selected, but for the injuries, and his club affiliation is quite good too. And he did play as a right back for the two November 2023 World Cup qualifying matches. So playing as much as a right back in this period as he is as a central defender, although he is coded as a central defender. Next is possible candidate Jose Maria Jimenez. As we said, he's the captain of the team, but hasn't actually played that much. We'll get into that. Jimenez is 29 years old, 83 caps and 8 goals since 2013 for the national team. He's also been with Atletico Madrid since 2013 after moving from Danubio in Uruguay. He's been part of tournaments since the 2014 World Cup and was a starter in the 2022 World Cup as well. And since then, though, he's only started one of their 11 games. He's subbed in for one. He's been out with 3 separate injuries for 7 games. So Jose Maria Jimenez not seeing a lot of action. But again, we're quite confident he'll be selected. We only put him at the possible level, though, because of that participation. Also at the possible level is Bruno Mendes. He is 24 years old. He's got 6 caps for the national team since 2018, so having a bit of trouble getting onto the team, and still is. He was actually off the team for 3.5 years when he returned in June of 2023 and started just one of their remaining 9 games. However, he did sub in for 3 and was on the bench for 4. Bruno Mendes. However, he too was not selected for the last match. So never good when a player is not selected close to a tournament. The 2 possible but unlikely candidates we'll just leave at the as names on the list. Santiago Bueno, who's with Wolverhampton in England, and Nicolas Marachal, who's with Dynamo Moscow in Russia. We'll talk more about them if they are selected. Seemingly off the squad, we will talk a little bit about Sebastian Coates here, because he's a bit of a veteran for them. Has been part of many tournaments since the Copa America 2011. And he does play for Sporting Lisbon in Portugal since 2017. So it's surprising they're not using him a lot. But I've kind of always been surprised that he's not been used a lot. In none of the many tournaments he's been in has he ever really been a starter. More of a bench player and a substitute. In the World Cup, though, he was on the bench for game 1, but gained a starting position for the following 2 games, making it that much more surprising that he hasn't been part of the team. March 2023, his last appearance for Uruguay. So Sebastian Coates, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him come back into the picture, especially since they really only have 4 candidates at the possible level or higher here, and teams usually bring 5 or 6 players to tournaments. Let's summarize the position. In the World Cup, it was Jimenez and veteran Godin starting the first game. The second game was the only time they used a 3-man backline. Coates joined Jimenez and Godin there. And in game 3, it was Jimenez and Coates as the starting pair. So we do see that Coates continued after the Cup for the first 2 games. He was partnered with Bueno there, but neither of them started any games beyond those March 2023 friendlies. It was Cáceres and left back Vina who were the pairing in the June games, June 2023, and they became the pairing for the first 2 World Cup qualifying games. Cáceres continued throughout as one of the central defensive choices, but his partner changed. After Vina played 2 games, it was Araujo for 2 games, and then Oliveira for 2 games, including the last friendly in March 2024. In there, though, Jimenez did return for 1 World Cup qualifying game. All right, that is the central defense. And we're going to move on to left backs. So the left back, I'll talk about the position briefly. It's always a left back, and that's true on the right side, always a right back. The only exception was game 2 of the World Cup, where the position was pushed up to become left wing and right wing position. Okay, let's look at the candidates. We have Matthias Wiener as a likely candidate, so no definite candidates here, and Matthias Oliveira as a likely candidate also. And then we have 2 possible candidates in Joaquin Piquerez and Lucas Olaza. All right, let's look at these candidates. Matthias Wiener is 26 years old. He has 30 caps for the national team since 2019, and he plays for Flamengo in Brazil since 2024. He moved there actually from Roma in Italy, where he was for 3 years. And he was loaned out from Roma to other teams, including Bournemouth in England. Matthias Wiener has been part of the last 2 tournaments. He was a starter in Copa America 2021, but just a substitute in the 2022 World Cup. Since then, he started 6 of their 11 games, as well as subbing in for 2 and on the bench for 2. So he is a likely candidate, Matthias Wiener. Next, we have Matthias Oliveira. He is 26 years old with 17 caps and 1 goal since 2022. And he plays for Napoli in Italy since 2022, Getafe in Spain before that, but he was loaned out to just loaned out to 1 other Spanish club there. Matthias Oliveira was part of the World Cup 2022 squad. That was his first tournament, but he was a starter for all 3 games of that tournament. Since then, though, he started only 4 of their 11 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, Matthias Oliveira. So he also is a likely candidate. The first of our possible candidates is Joaquin Piquerez. He is 25 years old and has 13 caps for the national team since 2021 and plays for Palmeiras in Brazil since 2021 also. He has no tournament experience. He was on that big preliminary squad for the World Cup in 2022, but didn't make the final cut, and returned after a 16-month absence in March of 2023 to start 5 of their remaining 11 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1, and not selected for 4 matches, including the last 3. That's a big part of the reason we have him at the possible level, because he was not selected for the last 3 games. Our other possible candidate is Lucas Olaza. He just has 1 cap for the national team since 2023, and I should have said he's 30 years old. He plays for Krasnodar in Russia since 2023, having moved there from Real Valladolid in Spain. And he also was part of the World Cup preliminary squad, but didn't make the cut. And his actual first cap was in June of 2023. So he was actually named to that preliminary squad without ever having appeared for the team. He got his first appearance in June of 2023. And he started one of those experimental games in June. That was his only start. But he was on the bench for 3 matches as well, and not selected for 5 others. However, one of his appearances on the bench was the last match, so we have him as a possible candidate here. That is Lucas Olaza. Okay, that's it. We have no candidates beneath that, so we can summarize the position. And for left back, it was Oliveira in all 3 games of the World Cup, Matthias Oliveira, even in the game where the position was pushed up to the left winger role. After the Cup, though, 3 different players were used in the first 4 games. That was under the interim manager. Only Piquerez was used twice, but Piquerez continued to play into the first three World Cup qualification games. Oliveira played the position twice, also, just as he had in the Cup. But for the last three games, it was Matthias Vina. So Matthias Vina looking like the most likely starter there, but it's hard to say. Let's go to the right back position. No definite candidate here, but a likely candidate in Nahitan Nandez. We also have Guillermo Valera as a possible candidate, and several who are seemingly off the squad, including Jose Luis Rodriguez and Giovanni Gonzalez, both of those with tournament experience. And of course, we mentioned the retired Martin Cáceres, the veteran in this spot here. Okay, and yeah, that's all the candidates we have. Let's take a quick look at the players. Nahitan Nandez, the first or the only likely candidate here, is 28 years old. He has 54 caps for Uruguay since 2015. No goals, though. He plays for Cagliari in Italy since 2019 and was with Boca Juniors in Argentina before that. He was on the preliminary squad for the 2016 Copa America Centenario. Didn't make the final cut there, but has been part of squads, well, kind of ever since, for three tournaments, but not for the 2022 World Cup, where he was not even selected for the big preliminary squad there. So he returned after an almost 2-year absence in September of 2023, Nahitan Nandez, and he started 5 of their remaining 7 games. The only 2 he missed, he was injured for, so seems to be right back in the thick of it here. And Nahitan Nandez we're putting as a likely candidate. Guillermo Valera is a possible candidate. He's 31 years old, only 14 caps for the national team since 2017, and he plays for Flamengo in Brazil since 2023. He's played in Russia and Denmark, and also on the squad for Manchester United in England as well. So a very diverse club history for Guillermo Varela. Okay, he also was on the preliminary squad for the 2016 Copa America Centenario, not selected though for that or the 2019 Copa America, but he was selected for the 2 World Cups in 2018 and 2022. He started 1 of their 11 games since the World Cup in 2022. He was also subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. 4 matches that he was injured for, but not selected for the last match. So all of that added up to a possible rating here for Guillermo Varela. And let's take a quick look at the 2 candidates who seem to be off the squad. Both of them have tournament experience, but Jose Luis Rodriguez has not appeared since September 2023, and Giovanni Gonzalez even longer, not appearing since March 2023. And of course, Martin Cáceres not appearing since the World Cup. Okay, let's summarize the position. It's Martin Cáceres in the first game of the World Cup, but the changing of the guard happened there, and Varela took over for the last 2 games. And as we saw, the position was a right winger in game 2. After the Cup, in the kind of confusion after the Cup, 3 different players started the 4 friendlies. We're going to see that in almost every position. Varela only actually in one of those 4 games. Nandez, though, took over the spot for the first 4 World Cup qualifying games. He also played the last game, the March 2024 friendly. And for the November World Cup qualifying games, it was central defender Araujo playing in the position. So it looks like definitely they've struggled in this position, bringing Nandez back and using an out-of-position player as the backup. Okay, that is the defense. We're going to move up to the midfield here and look at the defensive and central midfielders, both as one. I'll talk about the formations that affect this. So sometimes Uruguay uses a 4-3-3 formation. We're going to consider that a single central defensive midfielder. And in the 4-3-3, we'll look at the left midfielder and the right midfielder separately. In the 4-2-3-1 formation, which they use equally as much, it's a 2-man position. Yes, okay, that is as much as I'll say about that. We'll talk about it more when we get to that position. When we get to the left and right midfield, I mean. But let's deal with defensive and then central midfielders here. So for defensive midfielders, we have a definite candidate in Manuel Ugarte. And we have 2 possible but unlikely candidates, Emiliano Martinez and Nicolas Fonseca. Manuel Ugarte is 23 years old, has 15 caps for the national team since 2021, and plays for Paris Saint-Germain in France since 2023. He was with Sporting Lisbon before that, from 2021 to 23. The World Cup in 2022 was his first selection for a tournament. He was on the roster there, but didn't see any action on the bench for all 3 games. However, he's become a starter since, starting 8 of their 11 games since the World Cup. He was suspended for 1 and not selected for 2. Well, we have Manuel Ugarte as a definite candidate here. From there, we go down to possible but unlikely. We have Emiliano Martinez, and he got his first appearance in June 2023. He started 1 game. He was injured for all the World Cup qualifying matches and then not selected for the last match. So looked like he was getting in, but injury seems to have prevented it. He plays for Midtjylland in Denmark since 2022. The other player, Nicolas Fonseca, has no caps for the national team. He just got his first appearance there in the last game in March 2024. He was just on the bench for that. So perhaps he will make the squad, but we think it's unlikely. All right, well, before we kind of summarize the position, we're going to treat defensive and central midfielders as one. So we're going to forge on to look at the candidates for central midfield. And we have no definite candidate, but a likely candidate in Rodrigo Bentancur. I should actually mention that we do kind of have a definite candidate. It's Federico Valverde, but we're moving him to right midfield for reasons we'll explain later. It's not a big move, but we'll move him over there. Here we have Rodrigo Bentancur as likely then, and Philippe Carvalho as a possible candidate, and players seemingly off the squad, Lucas Torreira. Yeah, we have 2 other candidates, one of them with tournament experience, but they've been off the squad both since June 2022, so we'll only bring them back into the discussion if they're selected. Let's look at the candidates here. Rodrigo Bentancur is 28 years old, and he has 58 caps and 1 goal since 2017. And he plays for Tottenham in England since 2022, was with Juventus in Italy before that, 5 years. and he was a starter in the World Cup in 2018, has been part of every tournament, a starter also in the 2022 World Cup. Rodrigo Bentancur, and he was absent though after the Cup. He returned in November of 2023 and started one of their remaining 3 games, and he was subbed in for the 2 others. So he wasn't injured for that period. I'm not sure why he wasn't selected, but coming back into the team fairly recently, Rodrigo Bentancur. So we consider him a likely candidate. The possible candidate is Philippe Carballo, and he is 27 years old with 7 caps for the national team since 2023, so a bit of a late joiner there. He plays for Grêmio in Brazil since 2023. He was on the preliminary squad, the 55-man preliminary squad for the World Cup, but didn't make the final cut, and had been named to that squad without ever appearing for the national team. So his first appearance was actually in March 2023, Carballo, and he started 1 of their remaining 11 games and subbed in for 6 of them. So Carballo, a possible candidate here, not much of a starter, more of a bench player, but we think his chances of getting selected are at the possible level. We'll have a quick word about the seemingly off the squad Lucas Torreira, because he's been a fairly big name for them. He's got 40 caps. His club affiliation is also quite good, and he's been part of every tournament from the 2018 World Cup through to the most recent World Cup. Never really a starter though. In the one tournament where he was a starter, the Copa America 2021, he lost his starting position. Hasn't appeared for the national team since the 2022 World Cup, though, which is a bit surprising. But anyway, we have Lucas Torreira for that reason as seemingly off the squad. Okay, now that we've looked at defensive and central midfielders, we can summarize the position. So, as we said, we consider it a one-man position in the 4-3-3 formation, and it was Bentancur in games 1 and 2 of the Cup, and he was joined in game 3 by Valverde, who we now have moved to a right midfielder, so we'll talk about him a little bit later. After the Cup, though, it was Ugarte and left midfielder Vicinho, who were the pairing in the 2 March 2023 games. And when it was a single player in the 4-3-3, it was Ugarte all the time, except for once when Bentancur returned at the end to the position. So Bentancur playing 1 game there. Ugarte was also part of the defensive central midfield when it was a 4-2-3-1 formation. That's why he's a definite candidate, because he's there regardless of the formation. We saw that Vicinho started as his partner in the March 2023 games, but he didn't continue as the partner. It was actually Valverde, who we're going to meet right away, who was his partner most of the time through World Cup qualifying games. I say most of the time because that formation wasn't always used, the 2-man position. Okay, so we are ready to move up to the left midfield. So really here we're only talking about the games where they used the 4-3-3 formation. In the other formation, basically you can think of it as Ugarte and Valverde. And basically in the 4-3-3, you can think of it as Ugarte, Valverde, and one other person. But that person will be on the left because Valverde generally plays on the right. We'll meet him soon. On the left, though, we have 2 candidates. One is at the likely level. It's Nicolas de la Cruz. He's actually attacking midfielder, and he's played each position equally as much. So we're going to introduce him here only because it comes first. So Nicolas de la Cruz, we'll also talk about him when we get to attacking midfielders. And we have Matthias Vicinho at the possible but unlikely level now. So let's look at the candidates here. Nicolas de la Cruz is 26 years old. He has 26 caps for the national team and 5 goals since 2020. And he plays for Flamengo in Brazil since 2024. Plays for River Plate in Argentina for 6 years before that. And he was selected for the 2021 Copa America. He was a starter there, but only a sub in the 2022 World Cup. Nicolas de la Cruz has started 7 of their 11 games since the World Cup, though. He was injured for 2 and not selected for 2 matches. So Nicolas de la Cruz, a likely candidate. And Matthias Vecino is 32 years old. He has 69 caps for the national team and 5 goals since 2016. And he plays for Lazio in Italy since 2022. He was with Inter Milan for 5 years before that. And he's been part of tournaments since the 2016 Copa America Centenario. In fact, he hasn't missed a tournament since then, all the way up to the 2022 World Cup, where he started games 1 and 2. And we saw already that he started both of their games, the first 2 games after the 2022 World Cup, where he was the partner in the central midfield. After that, though, he just subbed in for 2 and was injured for 2 and not selected for 5 matches, including the last 3. So drifting off the team is Matthias Vecino, and I did say that we would see kind of some veterans drifting off the team. He's one of them. Okay, let's summarize the position then. Again, we're only talking about half of the games. In the World Cup, we saw the position used twice in the 4-3-3 formation and in the 3-5-2 formation, and it was Vecino in both cases. Experimental players were used in the June friendly. The next time the 4-3-3 formation was used, we're going to see that on the right side too. But after that, it was attacking midfielder Nathan de la Cruz filling the role every time. And as we said, we will see de la Cruz also as an attacking midfielder. But when they use this formation, he seems to be in it. Let's go over to the right midfield. And here's where we finally meet Federico Valverde as a definite candidate. And we also have, no, I'm not going to add him to the list. I'll bring it up in part 2 if he comes back. Okay, Federico Valverde then is the only candidate here. And he's 25 years old and has 56 caps and 6 goals since 2017. And Valverde plays for Real Madrid in Spain since 2017. So he's been with that team for a long time. For the 2018 World Cup, he was only on the preliminary squad and didn't make the final cut. And then for the Copa America in 2019, he was a sub in games 1 and 2, and then got a starting position from game 3, and then was a starter in the 2 tournaments after that, including the 2022 World Cup. And he's been a starter ever since. He started 9 of their 11 games since the 2022 World Cup, not selected for the 2 others. And I think those were 2 of the kind of experimental or kind of friendly, not important games. Valverde is an important player for them then, and we can summarize the position, but it's basically all about him. When it's a 4-3-3, he's used as the right midfielder, but we also see he's used regularly when it's a 2-man central midfield as well. So basically starts most of the games in central midfield. All right, we're moving on upfield to the left attacking role, kind of a category we've created ourselves to encompass several formations. So in some formations, this could be the winger role, left winger and right winger on the other side. It could be a left attacking midfielder, or it could be a left forward, which we do see with Uruguay in their 4-3-3 formation. But we have found that it's often the same player playing in those roles, not just for Uruguay, but for many teams. Okay, so we begin with our likely candidate, Maximilian Araujo. Then we have three possible candidates in Brian Rodriguez, Christian Oliveira, and Facundo Torres. All right, let's take a look at these candidates then. Maximilian Araujo is actually coded as a left midfielder. We've just moved him here because this is where he plays. And he is 24 years old and has 7 caps and 1 goal for the national team. So quite new to the team. In fact, when he was named to the preliminary squad for the 2022 World Cup, he had never appeared for the national team. He didn't make the cut there, but he got his first actual appearance for the team in June 2023, and Araujo started from there 6 of their remaining 9 games, as well as subbing in for 1. He wasn't selected for the last match, which is a slight concern. But we do have him as a likely candidate. I knew I was missing something. I forgot to mention his club. So Araujo plays for Toluca in Mexico and was with Puebla in Mexico before that. Okay, that's Maximiliano Araujo. And we have the first possible candidate, Brian Rodriguez, next. He's 24 years old. 22 caps and 4 goals for the national team since 2019. He also plays in Mexico with Copa America and was with Los Angeles FC before that. He was selected for the 2021 Copa America, but not for the World Cup in 2022, not even for the preliminary squad, actually. And Rodriguez returned after a 19-month absence in June of 2023. And started 2 of their remaining 9 games, as well as subbing in for 3 and on the bench for 2. So he only missed 2 matches and was injured for those ones. But overall, we have him as a possible candidate, Brian Rodriguez. Next, Christian Oliveira. He is 22 years old, 3 caps for the national team since 2023. Like Brian Rodriguez, he plays for Los Angeles FC in USA, or like Brian Rodriguez used to. And they both also played for Almeria in Spain as well. Oliveira got his first appearance in September of 2023, right at the start of the World Cup qualifiers there, and he started 1 of their remaining 6 games. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, but not selected for the last match. So we have him as a possible candidate. That's Christian Oliveira. Finally, we have Facundo Torres as a possible candidate. He's 24 years old, 15 caps for the national team and 1 goal since 2021. And he plays for Orlando City in the USA since 2022. And he was part of the last 2 tournaments, including the World Cup, where he was on the bench. And he has since Facundo Torres started 2 of their 11 games, both of those kind of the experimental kind of friendly matches. Started 2 of them since the 2022 World Cup. He subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4, though. So just 2 matches that he wasn't selected for. However, one of them was the last match. So both Facundo Torres and Christian Oliveira missing the last match there. And for a summary of the position then, in the World Cup, it was actually Darwin Núñez, the forward. He was playing as a left forward in the 4-3-3 formation of Game 1. In Game 2, there was no left attacking position. The left back moved up to play left wing in the 3-5-2 formation. And in the 3rd game, it was Di Aracento, who we will meet as an attacking midfielder soon. He played as a winger in the 4-4-2 formation. That was game 3 of the World Cup. After the World Cup, Rodriguez played 2 of the first 3 matches, and Rodriguez did appear in 1 World Cup qualifier and also in the last game in March 2024. So Rodriguez's head kind of keeps popping up in this story. However, from the last friendly in June of 2023 and throughout World Cup qualifying, it was Maximiliano Araujo. So he seems the starter here. Oliveira got 1 start. That was the last World Cup qualifier in November. So all of these players are kind of active in recent games in the position, Araujo, Rodriguez, and Oliveira. Okay, let's move over to the right attacking position. And we have a definite candidate in Facundo Pellistri and a likely candidate in Augustin Canobio, Augustin Canobio, and then 2 possible but unlikely candidates, Luciano Rodriguez and Ignacio La Quintana. All right, let's go back and look at the candidates. Facundo Pellistri is 22 years old with 19 caps for the national team since 2022. He's on the roster of Manchester United in England since 2020, but he has been loaned out recently to Granada in Spain since 2024. And he moved over directly from Peñarol in Uruguay, which was his youth club and his first senior club. He was with other youth clubs too. No games for Manchester United, though, for Pellistri. He was selected for the World Cup in 2022. He started 2 of the games there, and he has started 8 of their 11 games, subbing in for 1 and on the bench for 1 as well. So Pellistri, a definite candidate here. Next, we have Augustin Canobio, who I put in the wrong place on the graphic there. He's a likely candidate. He's 25 years old with 12 caps and 1 goal for the national team since 2022. And he plays for Atlético Paranaense in Brazil since 2022. He was with Uruguayan teams before that. Canobio was selected for the World Cup in 2022. He just made 1 appearance as a substitute there and is not a starter here, really. Just started 2 of their 11 games since the World Cup, but he did sub in for 5 and was on the bench for 3. So regularly called up. Canobio, that's why we have him as a likely candidate. We jump down, though, to just possible but unlikely candidates, and we'll just leave them as names here: Luciano Rodriguez and Ignacio La Quintana, and if they are selected, we will give more information about them. We also have a player kind of seemingly off the squad here, but hasn't participated enough to really bring into the discussion. Let's summarize the position of right attacker. So it was in the World Cup, Pellistri playing as a right forward in game 1 and as a right winger in game 3 in the different formations there. And again, this position didn't exist in the 3-5-2 of game 2 because the right back moved up to play as the winger. After the World Cup, 3 different players in the 4 friendlies, but it was Pellistri who played twice, and then he took over the position really by storm, playing all other games except for 1 World Cup qualifier where Canobio was able to get a start. So looks like Pellistri is a strong starter here. Let's move to our last midfield position, the central attacking midfield. And again, we should have Nicolas de la Cruz here. He's probably more correctly placed here, but just his participation over the last period made it more sensible to introduce him earlier on. Anyway, think of Nicolas de la Cruz here, but we also have a candidate in Georgian de Arrascaeta. and he is a likely candidate. No, he's only a possible candidate. We also have a player seemingly off the squad, and I will put his name, Rodrigo Zalazar, last played in June of 2023. So we'll talk more about him if he is selected. And we'll talk about the position before introducing the one candidate we have here. The position is not used in any of the three formations that they used in the World Cup. However, it was used in about half of the games after the Cup in their 4-2-3-1 formation. And again, we would be introducing Nicolas de la Cruz here, but we've done that already. So let's look at Georgian Diarascaeta. And he is 29 years old with 45 caps and 10 goals for the national team since 2014. And he plays for Flamengo in Brazil and with Cruzeiro in Brazil prior to that. He's been part of tournaments since the 2015 Copa America, almost all of them, and almost always as a substitute, but he was a starter in the 2018 World Cup. He lost his starting position after game one, though. In the 2022 World Cup, it was the opposite. He subbed into game two and gained a starting position for the last game. And after the World Cup, though, he was off the squad for a while, Diarascaeta, and he was absent for 10 months. That included 2 separate injuries. He came back in October 2023, didn't start any of the remaining 5 games, but he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 2. So that makes him seem a bit more like a likely candidate. I think I'm going to move him up to that position, especially his consistent tournament history as well. So let's move Diarascaeta up to a likely candidate and summarize the position. So as we said, it's not used in the World Cup, but half the time after the World Cup, we have a central attacking midfielder. And actually, it was the ubiquitous Valverde, who's regular in central midfield. He played the position in 2 of the 4 friendlies after the World Cup. But by the time we get to World Cup qualifying, it's always Nicolas de la Cruz. He played it all 4 times they used the formation in World Cup qualifying there. Okay, we move on to the forwards. We do have one player coded as a secondary striker. No, I'm not going to introduce him, though, because he's been off the team for too long. So let's go directly to forwards. And we have a definite candidate in Darwin Nunez and a possible candidate in Luis Suarez. And another possible candidate in Federico Vinas. He's actually the only player here with an injury doubt, which I'll talk about soon. And we have a player seemingly off the squad in Maxi Rodriguez. Sorry, what am I talking about? Maxi Gomez. We also should put Edinson Cavani here. He's not actually officially retired, but he hasn't been a part of the squad since 2022 World Cup. And then we have Jonathan Rodriguez also as a seemingly off the squad player. And for this position, we actually have 4 other players that we could put on the list here who have had some involvement recently, but not recently enough that we are going to mention them. We'll see if they come up in part 2. Let's go to the bios then for Darwin Nunez. He's 24 years old, a definite candidate here. 22 caps and 8 goals for the national team since 2019. And he's with Liverpool in England since 2022. Benfica in Portugal before that. He was not selected for the 2021 Copa America, despite having been on the Uruguayan squad for 2 years before that. However, he was called up for the 2022 World Cup, his first tournament, where he started all 3 games. Over the recent period, he started 6 of their 11 games. He was out with 2 separate injuries for 3 matches. That includes the last match, though he has recovered since then. And he was not selected for 2 matches. Nevertheless, he's a big name, and as forwards go, their biggest name right now. So Darwin Núñez, we consider a definite candidate. The first of our possible candidates does not need much introduction. It's Luis Suarez. So he's 37 years old now, 138 caps and 68 goals since 2007, and currently playing for Inter Miami in the USA since 2014. I'll just go back over his recent history because people may not know. He was with Grêmio in Brazil in 2023 and 24, and was with Nacional in Europe, his second stint with them after he left Atletico Madrid in 2022. But he's also played for Barcelona, Liverpool, and Ajax. So part of many tournaments since the 2010 World Cup there. The only tournament he missed was the 2015 Copa America, where he was under a ban for his biting thing in the 2014 World Cup. And he returned after an 11-month absence recently. Sorry, I should transition that by saying he was part of the World Cup there. He started 2 games as well as subbing into the middle game there, and he returned. So he was off the team after the World Cup, but returned after an 11-month absence in November 2023. Didn't start any of their remaining 3 games, but was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. However, he was not selected for the last match, and this looks like a bid to make it to this tournament, but we'll have to see if that's going to be a successful bid, because we have Luis Suarez only as a possible candidate here. The other possible candidate is Federico Vinas. He's 26 years old, just 2 caps for the national team and 1 goal. And Vinas plays for Leon in Mexico, Club America in Mexico before that. And he, like Luis Suarez, showed up in November 2023. It was his first appearance, though. And he started 1 of the 3 remaining games. He started the last match in March of 2024. He also subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 1 other, both of those, the November games. So Federico Vinas, however, he is out with an Achilles tendon rupture since late May. He missed the last 2 club games of the season for his club, and he's tagged with an unknown return date. So Federico Vinas may not be an option. Actually, since that injury occurred in late May, it doesn't look likely that he would be fit in time. We'll have a quick look at Maxi Gomez and Jonathan Rodriguez. Gomez has been part of tournaments since the 2018 World Cup, so 4 tournaments in a row that he was part of. Never a starter, though. He subbed into 2 games in the 2022 World Cup. And he has been active since then. He started 2 games since the World Cup. And he also subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 1. But he was injured for the last one and not selected for 6 of the matches overall. So Maxi Gomez, another of the kind of more experienced players drifting off the squad there. Jonathan Rodriguez also has tournament experience in Copa Americas, at least. Never selected for World Cups, and not selected for the last World Cup there. He was on the preliminary squad but didn't make the final cut. Jonathan Rodriguez last appeared in March of 2023, so he too seems to be drifting off the team. Or he's more kind of in and out of the team, I would say. Let's summarize the position. I should have talked about the position in theory before. I'll do that now. So usually it's just one position here. In the 4-3-3 formation, we see that as a single forward with a right attacker and a left attacker. In the 4-2-3-1 formation, it's obviously a single attacker. So the only time we saw two forwards being used was that 3-5-2 formation in Game 2 of the World Cup. They also used a 4-4-2 in the World Cup. So in two of the World Cup games, there was a double forward. In Game 1, it was the single forward. It was Suarez in the position. In Game 2, it was a switch-up. It was Cavani and Nunez as a pairing. And then in Game 3, it was Suarez and Nunez as a pairing. In the friendlies afterwards, with Suarez and Cavani out of the picture now, three different players played in the friendlies after the Cup. None of them was Darwin Nunez, but Maxi Gomez played twice in two of the four games. Gomez fell off the radar, though, and by the time we get to the World Cup qualifying games, it's Darwin Nunez in all 6 games of the Cup as a single forward. Nunez was absent for the last game, though, and it was Vines who stepped in. Federico Vines, but now we know he's injured, so he won't be a candidate. So we are a little thin up at the top here. That kind of opens the door a little bit for Luis Suarez. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of section 2. So section 3, closing thoughts. All I really want to say here is that the kind of changing of the guard continues. We saw a lot of or 4 major retired players in part 1, and we can add to that Oscar Tabarez, the manager under whom this generation did so well. And then throughout section 2, we saw some of the more experienced players just being used less, but some of them are still around. And we saw some kind of new players making their way in. And that's a good transition for the review of starters, because we'll be talking about some of them. I'm just going to switch off here and set that up. Here we are then, back up at the top of the list, and we're going to say that Marcelo Bielsa is effectively a starter, as we don't think they'll change managers before the tournament. As for goalkeeper, we did have 3 likely candidates, but Sergio Rocher is clearly ahead of them. He starts all the important games. I think Mele started one of the World Cup qualifying games, and he's definitely the backup here. But otherwise, they play just friendlies. So Sergio Rocher, we expect to be the starter in the Cup, and I'm quite confident about that. Moving on to central defence, they've always used 2 central defenders. Definitely, we think one of them is going to be Sebastian Cáceres, but we're not sure who the other is going to be. I personally think Jose Maria Jimenez, who only played one of the games after the World Cup, so participation-wise, there's no kind of basis for saying so, but I think Jimenez will be the one. Anyway, it's up in the air, so I won't nominate a second central defender there. On the left side, I just want to quick look at my notes here. I think it's okay. I'm humming and hawing. Vina was in the position for the last 3 games, but he's only a likely candidate here. So maybe we'll put him in kind of a blue highlight. Really, the position was shared over the period we're looking at, as if the manager was kind of trying to decide which one he would go with. So Oliveira and Piquerez have a chance, but it seems like Vina has the best chance. On the right side, there are fewer candidates to deal with. It looks like they've had a bit of trouble even finding one player for this position. They kind of brought Nandez in from out of the cold. Here, I think it is going to be him. In fact, because of the lack of other candidates, I'm going to add confidence to that. instead of using possible candidate Guillermo Varela when Hernandez was not used, they brought in a central defender to play out of position. So it looks like Ronald Araujo is really the backup here. And I wonder if Varela will even be selected for the squad. Okay, moving on to the midfield, defensive midfielders. We can say with confidence that Manuel Ugarte is going to be the starter. Whoops, I've got the wrong color there. We don't really have any candidates beyond that until we get to the left midfielder, Valverde, who will also put as a definite starter there. But among the players we have listed as defensive and central midfielders, maybe Rodrigo Bentancur has an outside chance of being a starter, but I'm going to jump down to the left midfielders. They used a 4-3-3 formation about half of the time, and when it was a 4-2-3-1, when it was a 4-3-3, Federico Valverde was the right midfielder. That's why we put him here. When it was a 4-2-3-1, he was almost always the central midfielder accompanying Ugarte. So we're going to put him as a definite candidate. Similarly, Nicolas de la Cruz is always the left midfielder in a 4-3-3. And when they use a 4-3-2-1, 4-2-3-1, he's the attacking midfielder in the center. So we think he's going to be a definite starter, regardless of the formation that they use. Up to the left attacking side of the field, do we have enough confidence in Maximiliano Araujo? Definitely he's the most likely candidate, but hasn't started enough to really be confident in. I think we're going to put Maximiliano Araujo in blue. Not fully confident that he'll be a starter, but the most likely one in this position. Over on the left, though, we have more confidence in Facundo Pellistri as a starter. We think that's a definite one, so we're putting our full confidence behind that. And as a central attacking midfielder, we would go with Nicolas de la Cruz, who we introduced as a left midfielder. If they use the formation that requires this position, we think it would be Nicolas de la Cruz. Going on to the forward formation, well, they've lost some big names here. Edinson Cavani hasn't played since the World Cup. Luis Suarez is still on the squad, just kind of came back in November, seems to be making a bid to get onto the squad. Definitely he wouldn't be the starter, he'd be more of a substitute. Darwin Nunez has basically taken over the role, so we think he'll definitely be the starting forward. Okay, that is our review of starters, our blaze through the team. So we'll go to the third order of business in section 3 here, and a review of injuries. Uruguay is lucky, they just have one concern. It's Venus Federico. We'll put him in the unknown section here, because that's what he's listed as, an unknown return date. He got an Achilles tendon rupture since late May. He missed the last 2 club games of the season, and that seems too late. That seems the injury was late enough that it looked like it would prevent him from playing in the cup. I had a little trouble spitting all that out, but there I said what I wanted to say. In other words, I doubt that he'll be back, but I am no doctor, so we will see in part 2 whether he does come back. And speaking of part 2, we will preview part 2. We're going to do that when the squad list is released. The final squad is released, and then we'll go back over the list that we created here and tell you who made it and who didn't. We'll pay attention to any notable non-selections, so players we thought were likely or definite who didn't make the squad, or surprise inclusions. There's always a few of them, players at the possible level or below who did make the squad, or new players added late to the squad. We'll also give an update on injuries as well. And that is it for part one, and we hope you join us for part two. We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.